This is Twit.
Tell us about Railroader. What problem are you solving when you're reaching for it?
Well, Railroader is basically a security static analysis tool for applications that use Ruby on Rails. So what that means is if you are using Ruby on Rails and you'd like to not have security vulnerabilities, and that should describe all of them, this is a tool that you can reach out for, download, install, and have it run through your code and look for problems before you ship it out. Now, I want to be careful. Railroader doesn't guarantee that it can find vulnerabilities, but it's scanning and looking for common problems so you can go fix them first. It's static, and that means it's not running the program, so it's actually looking at all the code. Probably the more interesting thing from your point of view maybe is that it's a fork of an existing project that used to be open source software called Brakeman. A lot of folks who've used Ruby on Rails in the past have used Brakeman. It's a really good tool. And they recently changed their license to be proprietary. And I was very disappointed in that. So I wanted to create wanted to keep it going and needed to change the name so we could keep it going.
So Perl is very difficult to parse. This I know from having stared at things like PPI and other things like that. Is Ruby easier to parse? Are you able to actually understand with a static analysis what the code is doing?
Well, those are actually two different questions. Ruby's definitely Ruby's easier to parse. Than Perl 5 at least. I've looked briefly at Perl 6, but I haven't really delved into it. But Perl 5 is harder to parse, although Ruby actually was inspired in part by Perl. So there's actually some, you can actually point to some things and say that looks similar. From a static analysis point of view, there's good and bad. First of all, there's existing libraries for parsing Ruby. So in fact, Railroader itself just calls out to an existing parser. It doesn't try, there's no point in rewriting a parser. There's already one. The bigger issue you pointed, though, is that Ruby, like many other programming languages, doesn't have a baked-in static type system. So in that case, it's just like Perl, it's just like Python, PHP, traditional JavaScript. And that means that it is harder for a static analysis tool to find problems. Now, there's a plus on this, and that this is that Brakeman originally, and now Railroader, is not just for Ruby in general. It is specific to Rails. Now, I don't know if you've ever worked with Rails, but Rails is a widely used web framework. If you use GitHub, if you use GitLab, and those are just two of the many programs that are built using Rails. Rails is extremely opinionated. It says, hey, this is where you put the models. This is where you put the controllers. This is where you put the views. And as a result, although it's not exactly like a static type system, there's a whole lot that should be happening if it's a Rails project. And that gives a static analyzer quite a bit to work with. So you can look for and say, well, wait a minute, this should be a controller. No, this is a view. This is not a view. And you can do a whole lot of things based on that information. And you can design checkers specifically that exploit that. That does mean that it doesn't work on other Ruby frameworks. For example, there's another one called Sinatra. It's not nearly as popular as Rails, but certainly people use it. But it's this Railroader won't work in that case. It's very, very focused on Ruby on Rails, but Ruby on Rails is fairly popular. So that for those who have that kind of application, it's helpful.